Meetings, all right. Okay, agenda materials, okay. Well, I'm on this thing that says interim, but I don't see how I'm going to how you download the slides.
Hold on one second. All right, so if you clicked on the meeting, and then there should be, hold on.
It says interim 2023. And there's a heading slides, but nothing under it.
Echo meeting materials folder is empty. So you may just need to present off your local system.
Sorry?
Well, Dave, there's a bug. So if you do an interim schedule one way, it does all of the magic behind the scenes and sends it out. And if you do it from another way that's also recommended on the website, it's broken. And I just found that bug. So I'm populating the materials kind of as we speak.
Well, I don't know how to do it, so let me get back to the meeting.
Yes, Dave, if you send the slides to me, I can upload them and I can do your slides.
Okay, I can do that.
Eventually need to get them.
All right, sure. All right, I can do that. Let's see. All right, let's see. All right, let me go here. Gmail.
Brian, your slides, I did manage to upload them after they rather rapidly created this interim meeting entry in the system for me, which I appreciate.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I can.
Oops. Maybe not. Hey, Chris, can you hear me?
Yes. We can hear you. I don't know if you can hear us.
All right, I just sent the slides to Chris.
Okay. Moment.
Now it's Gmail, and we know that Gmail is the devil.
You know what? I mean, most of the time I don't have any problem with Gmail, but for the, man, when it decides no, I don't know how to make that get better. And I'm going to display. Oh, well, that's interesting. It says nothing is ready. There's a glitch in the matrix. Probably because this meeting isn't connected to this interim. Right. Never mind. All right. Dave, it'll probably take a few minutes for me to get yours slides. When I get them, I'll be ready. We can start off with Brian's slide.
Hey, Chris.
Hey,
You can hear me?
I can.
I've asked
Well, I could
about
hear you before, to be fair.
why didn't you respond? I restarted.
All right, I've now covered up like every window with the PowerPoint, so you guys are just gonna actually see
Something.
you're just gonna actually see like a whole desktop because. Or maybe not, because it's not going to let me do that, is it?
A screen share is being started.
Maybe. Oh, really? That's okay to do this?
Yeah, I sent an email out. I'm declining to use the note-taking tool since it discarded all my content from the last meeting and the prior meeting.
All right, this is really going to be complicated for sharing slides. All right, David, if you know how to like jam something in there super fast into the meeting materials, please do share.
Do what? Okay, share screen.
Yeah, I
All right.
can't. Well, I can do that, but right now I didn't ever permit my browser to do that,
Should
so I
I
have to
say
log.
yes or no? So it says I changed my mind.
I mean, you can say yes. My browser that I'm logged into the meeting with doesn't have permission to share my screen.
All right, let me say yes now.
Although not to belittle David Black's capabilities or wise counsel. This is going to be a little boring since the three chairs meet weekly anyway. So
I
if
was
it's just you,
wondering about attendance here. I'm the only non-chair.
maybe I should have
Doesn't
required.
I can't figure out how to share.
Yeah, all right, hold on. I'm going to drop so I can share, and then I'll come right back.
Okay.
Okay, I got, this is not ideal, but this is going to have to do it. And did BP leave to fix his browser as well?
I guess.
All right. If I could remember. How about this? David Black, can you read these?
Do you see anything?
Yeah, they're a little small, but I can read them.
Well, then you know what? Since you're an audience of one, that's good enough.
No, it's fine. Oh, fine. All I got to do is expand the window. I'm staring at a 32-inch monitor. I might as well use it for something.
I can do that.
Okay, now I now see it. All right.
All right. Now, if I could just find Brian. And I guess this means we're the only ones coming.
I guess. So we're
Well,
all going to talk to David, really, because we talk to ourselves, to each other.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to cover this. So I think everything on here is fairly self-explanatory. The big thing is we're looking for more feedback on the layout draft. So obviously we're with no comments on the list. We're at this point planning to bring it to San Francisco and talk about it.
I'll try to get a review out by that time.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a promise.
So we restarted the. All right, Brian's. I can stop covering his chair as soon as he's good to go. So I will cover the last two because they're super easy, right? So the last call on parallel NFS, enough response. It was good in the room, so we'll be moving that forward and out of the working group. And the same thing with the RDMA extensions. And Brian, if you're ready, I'll let you cover the state ID, Delsted, as I've been calling it. Well, I don't see him with mic or video available. All right. So I'll just cover it, right? If he's offline. Okay, so since we talked about this yesterday, David Black, this is really just for you. Got a new revision out on the list in response to the previous last call, which we think answers everything. So we're restarting another working group last call for it, 2 weeks. So we hope by the time we get to San Francisco, we can say that one's moving forward. That's the update on documents, unless there are questions. I feel like I should just write the minutes and be done with this meeting in a way. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that. And then I'm going to start sharing yours, Dave.
Fine, thanks.
Window. This is it.
Okay, yes, I see it. All right. So a central part of the RFC 5661 BIS effort is this document, RFC 5661 BIS. So on to the next. I think we move on to the next slide. Okay. Overview is why are we doing this, what's in it, and some attempt to get discussion started. But we only have one person here. But anyway, any discussion that you have, David, will be appreciated. But let's go forward. All right. So we start out with a certain number of motivations for this document, for this group of documents, really, but we're focusing on this one now. We need to separate areas that were common to all minor versions. Now, historically, the V4.1 said, well, this is entirely a separate protocol, blah, blah, blah. But that turned out not to be true. Internationalization was thing, was different. Security is should be pretty much the same for all minor versions, and also the extension process was the same. Anyway, so what we have beyond that, we have had a ton of errata reports, and I think we've got most of those. There are a few left. Anyway, we also want to have a solid document that describes NFV 4.1. So we had a number of additional documents. We had 5661, we had 8881, and then we also had Tom Haynes's document 8434, and that can no longer be a separate document. We want a single document. And we had, I say unsatisfactory. I don't know what adjective to use, but unsatisfactory covers it. Treatment of security. There's no threat analysis in any of the documents, and how this is presented just does not convey all the problems. It does not convey any of the problems. It just says it's an optional means of authentication, and it should not be recommended, or should not be. Optional says, gee, you can take your choice without negative consequences. But I don't think that's the case, and it's not a means of authentication, despite the fact that the current document says that. All right, on to the next slide. Okay, as a result of our discussion, we now have related docs. Internationalization 06 is a working group document. It's been for a while. There's not much discussion on the list, but we're now having an art review, which we had some trouble doing, but the target date for that is now the 14th, and we'll see what happens. Now, the security document went to some sort of adoption call, and then that was delayed, and I think we need a plan on what we're going to do about that. In fact, one part of that is that while we're doing these adoption call cycles, the document expired, and I think I have to at least within the next week repost the current individual draft, and then we'll use that as a basis to decide on what we'll do about an adoption call. Another document we have is RFC 5662 BIS. It turns out we knew a small number of changes to that, and I've been meaning to bother Brian about getting an adoption call for that, but that hasn't been a big issue. I think that will just go through once we do the appropriate scheduling, because it's like 10 lines different. And then we have RFC 8178. That is already an RFC, but we need our new document to clearly indicate that is the definitive definition of extension for all minor versions. And RFC 8434, I've looked at that, and I think we have to figure out over the next few drafts how that incorporate that in RFC 5661 bis. On to the next next slide. Now, in the process of doing this, I had the task of reading documents, and actually found some things that had to be done. Lots of uses of RFC 2119 terms, not in accord with the definition, despite the fact that every document has this thing that says it does that, but very few actually do it. And there's a lot of confused terminology to clean up, I found out in this last draft. There's one place where it uses the term client owner to include the verifier, one time it doesn't. Also, there's the definition of the word verified describes one of like 6 different things that are verified, and that's been changed and fixed up. There are a number of, we defined directory delegation, and no one implemented it. And we had at a previous meeting, we discussed, gee, what's wrong? Why are we so slow handling? And I think part of the answer was that nobody had implemented directory delegation and notification, and that has to be written. People have like including Tron has said, well, it doesn't work because it doesn't do this, that, and the other thing, and I have to be clear what it does do and what it doesn't do. And that is discussed in the appendix, but it's not. There's no text for that, and I think that might be something I'll do in O2. Then there's a big section about memory mapped I/O and locking, and it's discussed. I've revised that in O1, and if you'd like to look at that, that'd be a good idea. And if you have some comments, I appreciate them. Anyway, on to the next slide. All right, I think this has gone out. This is how most people are not going to read the 600 to 700 page document, but the diffs are manageable. A diff between RFC 8881 and a 01 is kind of bad because there's artifacts and the sections move around, but you do, that is explained in all those changes are explained in dependencies B1 through B3, and that is helpful. And then once you get to that point, it's pretty easy to compare to an RFC diff of the -0 draft and the 01 draft. All right, on to the next slide. Okay, and going from 8881 to draft 00, we had caused a number of sections because I needed to have an introduction to the update as well as an introduction to NFSV4.1, and that caused that. So also we had to adapt to internationalization being done in its own document, protocol extension being in its own document, which is already done, and security being in its own document. We had to address a lot of errata reports, like tons of them. There are about half a dozen left. And we got around the thing where way back when someone decided was that the optional actions were recommended, and that doesn't fit. And in fact, RFC 7530 says, well, this document uses the term recommended except as it's defined in RFC 2119, except for this case. And I don't think we want to do that anymore. I think we're switching from recommended to lowercase recommended. And then as a way of keeping track of these changes as we move forward to get the document, there are 3 appendices. One is the nature of changes, B, the status of various changes, and C is the issues requiring further discussion. All right,
I
let's
assume
move
you've
on.
done this. I assume you've done this. Make sure you put a sentence in somewhere explaining the use of lowercase recommended, and what it means.
Okay, yes, all right, I can do that, yes. I think okay, yes, okay. Yes, that's fine, that should be done. Well, you just have to look in the dictionary, okay? As opposed to capital recommended, where you have to look at IETF documents.
Understood. And if you write a sentence to that effect, that'll help. That'll help the reader, as not every reader is going to automatically grasp that the use of lowercase was intended to avoid 2119 meaning.
Okay, yes, I'll try to make that clearer. That's on my must-do list for 02. All right, now on this slide, I'm going to talk about what have I done from 00 to 01. Now, a troublesome thing, this has to do with this capital must, is it says you must wait for the response. But lots of people, including the Linux client and every other client have, when you control C, you don't wait. And right now, we have a situation where it says must, and nobody follows, and that's not acceptable. So really, the meaning of must in RFC 8881 is, it would be really nice if things work this way, but they don't work this way. They can't work this way. No implementations do it. So that can't go on. All right. Another thing is discussion of retry, and because we have exactly one semantics, retry is unnecessary. But there's no reason, and it's not a good idea. But they have must not in the existing documents. But there's no justification for must not. It really means this is a bad idea, which it is. And I think because people felt strongly about that, it turned into must not, but that's not okay. So we use the phrase, and we continue to use the phrase EOS for exactly one semantics. But because you can control C something, you don't have exactly one semantics. What you have is at most one semantics. EOS provides the ability to make sure you don't do things twice, particularly if they're non-idempotent or modifying. But we have to be clear that what we do provide is at most once. And then I rewrote the section about memory mapping and locking. I think it would take too long to explain all the things that are wrong about that statement. I've listed them here, and I think you should look at that in the old document and in the new document. And if you find a problem in the new document, please let me know. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. All right, I found some terminology things that I mentioned before. It describes client owner. In one case, it uses it to mean the string plus the verifier, and one thing in one place it uses it to mean just the string. So I've distinguished between client owner, which includes both, and client owner ID, which is the string. And I think there are about 5 different verifiers. There's the write verifier, there's the reader verifier, there's the verifier on client instance. It's called the verifier. There's a whole bunch of them, and there's one in RFC 881. There's one definition, and it's just confusing. All right, I found the PNFS terminology need to be thing, because we have these in some places it refers to storage protocol, a data protocol, and some cases data server, which is appropriate for file servers, and storage device, which is appropriate for block device. So I created the generic term file data provider and data protocol rather than storage protocol. And there was discussion of control protocol because it's in Tom's flexible file. He says he doesn't have a control protocol, but the text in the current RFC 8881 says anything you do to accomplish the need is considered a control protocol. So I now have clarified that, so distinguish between those that don't have a separate control protocol. That was another thing that was in the clarification.
Based on what you've done on the PNFS terminology, is there anything Christoph needs to do to the NVMe PNFS draft?
I don't think so, because I haven't done it yet. And my document will become an RFC after his. And I don't want a situation where we have to go back and change the terminology of all the existing SCSI documents. So no, I think it should be clear that that is not necessary. We have to
I just
decide.
simply wanted to check. I mean, obviously the first item has no effect, and I would hope that the rest what you're doing is sort of clarifications that don't actually require any terminology changes in
Right. Yeah,
block drafts.
okay, that's another thing that should make clear that this is only going forward. Okay. All right. All right. I think we can go on to the next slide. Now, I've tried to reorganize the discussion of PNFS security, but I'm not done. What is needed is a thread analysis, dividing PNFS layout types into three. One is the files layout and the flexible files layout in what Tom calls the tied coupling mode. That one, you basically have enough material so that you're not requiring the client. You don't have to trust the client in the same way that you have to do on those that don't include RPC in the storage in the data access protocol. Now I intend to start working on the thread analysis of PNFS, but it'll be organized based on whether the data protocols uses the RFC, and we have to have a discussion of control protocols. In some cases, it's essentially no, because you have a cluster server, and everything that happens in what's called the control prog happens within something, and you have to make sure that people have no access to it, and people cannot somehow get control of one and the other and subvert it. So that's what's going to be done in the when I get the thread analysis for PNFS. All right, let's move on to the next slide. All right, so I now have to consider what's in draft 2. So I think I have 2 suggestions from David that are clarifications, and then there are 2 items in Appendix C2: clarifying director delegation and need work require persistence. Now, if you read the description of persistent sessions, you'll find, I think, that what is described is simply unimplemented, depending on how you interpret it. But that needs to clarify what it really requires and what it doesn't require. So one of the things is basically says everything has to be done atomically, and you can't do a compound atomically, sensibly. And if you do it, you're going to ruin performance. So to me, it looks like it says this is essentially unimplemented, even though it doesn't use those words. But if you tried to do it, you couldn't do it. So I think I need to make two things clear. One is, what is the real atomicity requirement? And the second thing is, there's some discussion of a server restarting in the middle of a compound, and how the second instance of the server would complete the compound, which doesn't seem to me I don't see how anyone can do that. And it doesn't give you an option to do anything else, to say, look, I did this much of the compound and I didn't, and after that couldn't continue.
Wait,
That's
hey Dave. Dave, we have a question from Chris. Chris?
Yes.
What's your question?
Yeah, so I'm just curious about the threat analysis part. So I don't want to interrupt the parallel piece of the conversation and the atomicity of the compounds, but I would be interested in like, hey, who's going to participate in the threat analysis? What's the approach? Should we reach out to the security area directorate?
Well, I think I'm going to draft what I can draft, and then reach out to the security. Hopefully, some help from the security area. But I don't think we're in a position to say, okay, we have to write a threat analysis. Please do it. They're not going to do that. Want to do that? It's not right to ask them. So I'll have to draft something, which I'll will take a month after IETF-117. But after that, I think we will be interested in both review, comments, or help. I hope it can be done by something other than the official review path, which doesn't seem to work very well.
Generally, the security area is willing to kind of, actually having been the victim under that bus before, send security area folks into different working groups to try and support, like, kind of within the working group structure itself, without just kind of sending it over the wall as a review this.
Okay, that'd be good. So, well, I know I'm not going to be prepared before 117, but I think I'll draft some notes, and we'll have something to discuss with the security team.
Okay.
Okay. Well, okay. So get back to the current slide. Well, we do have a few remaining errata reports, and we have to do those. And I've been putting them off, but I have to do it. And back to the lowercase recommended versus lowercase recommended. It doesn't seem like that's right. Although officially, according to the current spec, every option, every attribute which is not mandatory is lowercase recommended. Although some of them, it's recommended and you really have to do it. Although this is true of mode and owner and group. Those are officially optional / lowercase recommended attributes. Whereas the same is true of some new attribute that is put in, but I think there's levels of recommendation, and I think we'll have to be clear on what we really recommend and get away from that formula which says, well, we recommend you do all the actions that you think you can do, which doesn't mean anything. But I think there are a few that are really essentially optional. If I'm a client and I find a server that doesn't support mode or owner or group or ACL, well, I just can't use it. It's not optional in the sense that other attributes are optional. Even though I know capital recommended is wrong, but it appears that lowercase recommended is not right either. But it has to say.
Well, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
So, from an abstract plane point of reference, and I'm going to put that in here as the disclaimer because we're going to get lost fast. If situations as you describe it, which is that things like mode and group will cause clients not to work with the server, those aren't just recommended; those are required. In that, if you don't do it, interoperability isn't going to happen.
All right.
So I think
Yes.
I'll
consider that, but that's something the working group has to discuss. But I think that's the right answer.
Fully agree. But if the situation is as you described it, which is if you don't implement these really, really important ones, the clients are going to walk away. That isn't just recommended; that's required. So I think you wind up with three levels. You wind up with required or must, recommended, which you might want to move over to an uppercase should, so you're not using the same word with different capitalization, and then you can have a lowercase recommended for all the rest, and maybe some are truly optional. But sorry, I've just made your life more complicated.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough, though. It's a good point. All right. Other things that need doing is the last thing on this slide. So let's move on to the next slide.
Just tell you that I'm going to pull the con from you in about 10 minutes or so that we can just touch on the agenda for 117 time-wise. It's time check.
All right. Well, okay. I think these are anything people want to discuss, and this was intended for a larger audience, but it applies to whoever was here. If you think there are any problems with these appendices, do you have any comments regarding the differences? And I hope we'll have that on the list rather than here. And what are your other priorities for 02? Let's move on to the next slide. All right, things mentioned in 01 but not yet done, director delegation. I think I'm going to start drafting that. Persistence issues. I mentioned the persistence of, also there's some ambiguity about whether when a server restarts, he can have some way to communicate to keep locks persistent and avoid the grace period. And I think that might be controversial, but I think what I'm going to do is include that as a proposal in 02 and see how people like it. All right, let's move on. Next slide. Anything else that I missed? And then also, these slides have gone out to anybody. I think it's best to, if there are issues with what I've done so far, it's best to describe them on the working group list, and then we'll discuss it. Maybe there'll be a small amount of time in 117, segue into what Chris will discuss, and I hope we can get those resolved, because I feel, some of the biggest part is already done, and I've got a ton of the Zerata done, and I think I've done considerable stuff beyond that, and I know I'm pretty sure that I know what else needs to be done. All right, let's move on to the next slide. All right, this was this was my hope for the process. The actual process will be decided by the chairs after IETF 117, I think. We got to continue discussions of this document on the way to working group last call and submission. And we can do that at meetings like 117, although it won't be that much time for it, and interim meetings, which we will have after that. And the majority of the discussion has to happen on the working group mailing list. Now, I think there's at least two drafts before I would think about record, but it might be three. Anyway, that's the end of the slides. Okay, I'll turn it over to Chris now.
All right, any more feedback before I stop sharing this one? All right, and then this is the notional agenda for 117. And I was hoping that there'd be more people who want to bash this. We should be able to say, that we're shepherding some of these documents as we get there. I don't know if there will be any final conversation on Belsted at the meeting. The layout, I think should be, we should be able to say where we are outside of working group at that point. RDMA extensions, so hopefully we'll get something from Talpi. We'll do a reach out. I think we're going to have to talk about security in more broad terms and our approach to it. I appreciate Dave's willingness to put a big bullseye on his back and attempt to write the threat analysis and the outcome of that. I think we should have a broader conversation about how we want to approach that and what it might mean and how we think about kind of protocol structure for that topic going forward. I think that should be a conversation there. Internationalization efforts. Hopefully we have some interaction. So hopefully we have some technical interaction to discuss at 117 with regards to that. And John, if you want to add anything on that, feel free at this point. And then, we obviously participation for this interim is really poor. I will admit I found a bug in IETF web space. I have reported it earlier this afternoon, which is also how I managed to get a interim meeting approved and announced in like 10 minutes before an actual interim meeting. If this is because the main topic of conversation was 5661 BIS, we're going to have a problem because we will need more review and oversight than Dave doing yeoman's work just on this document. What am I missing on the agenda items? Because without feedback, this is what I'm going to publish in the next day or so.
Probably a report of the interim meeting.
Oh, fair enough. Good point.
And future interim meetings expectation. Maybe leave that for the end.
Yeah.
Because we want to group them together. This is supposed to be a regular cadence, but not this. More participatory meeting.
Well, let's hope that I've picked a really poor time, and people will come with mea culpas and tell me If only it were at some other time, I would have done it.
Right. But let's put it on the agenda at the end there, and so we'll beat the snot out of it and make sure we get to it. I thought you ran the survey and everything. I thought everybody agreed to this. Okay. Can you change internationalization efforts to internationalization move forward plan?
Yes.
I'd like to walk out with the next steps. Seems okay to me.
All right.
Okay, got that feedback. I will take it and react accordingly. All good updates. Brian, did you take notes for this? I mean, the meeting's recorded, and I took notes as well.
Yeah, can you send me your notes? I took notes. I did take notes, but I'm going to scan the recording and augment my notes because there was a few places I was actually paying attention a lot. So let me send me your notes and I'll combine this and I'll push them up. Okay.
Okay. I mean, I took them by hand, so I'll have to type them up.
Just take a snapshot of it and send it to me, unless you write like a toddler.
Yeah, it should be okay. I can do that.
Snapshot and send it to me. Thanks. All right.
All right. I saw John's comments in the chat. Nothing to add.
Hold on here. What was?
Well, and this is, chance for alibis and, any kind of, before we end this enormous party we have going on here.
I'll put a note in. John, I saw your comment here. I lost audio 2 or 3 times, and I rebooted my computer because I couldn't even make anything move in my. And I'm on a Chrome browser instead of Safari. This was a pretty complicated meeting to join. Okay.
All right. Oh, we have video but no audio, John.
Yeah, I lost audio a couple of times. Finally signed out and signed back in again, but certainly didn't hear a lot of the last part of the meeting.
Okay. So I know we have to use Meet Echo for IETF. Can we use Meet Echo and something else at the same time?
You don't actually have to use Meet Echo for. There are advantages from a chair's point of view, in that it's supposed to do a bunch of stuff for me. Like do the announcements that it didn't do. But you can do an interim with any tech we want.
All right, let's peel off and talk about this, because this was a little bit. I never have problems on meetings, and this was a little bit wild today. All right, anything else, Chris, Dave?
No, I'm okay.
All right, I move that we adjourn.
Great.
Seconded.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thanks for coming, John and David.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.